Welcome back to the Rabbi and the Other Guy again. Once again, I'm here with my good friend, Rabbi Daniel A. Septimus, post-Passover, who hosted me at his aunt's house. That was very nice of you for the first night of Seder. I actually had 2 Seders this year.
Yeah, and I was saying that it's an accomplishment that, you had 2 Seders, which is
I did. Full credit.
And if I'm not mistaken, you had them on actual first and second nights of Pesach. Is that correct?
I did. Actual first and second night.
So
I went to your house for the first night, or your aunt's house, more technically. And then we were going to do a small Seder at home, just the 4 of us, but then Kim's parents came in. So we had 6 people.
Oh, that's great. Well, that's fun.
So 2 full Seders. I really know the story well now, as if I hadn't heard it for like 51 straight years.
Now we got to work on you actually doing the other Chagim, the other holidays on the actual days.
I do it when it works out. It's not my fault.
I think, I don't know about that. We'll have that conversation with other rabbis. We'll have to ask Rabbi Trepp when he comes on. You claim he says
Rabbi Trepp is 100% on my side. 100%. I'll let him tell his own story, but I was not the only one who moved Yom Kippur last year, to be clear.
Interesting.
Several UT students moved it. Well, very smart.
To our listeners, Rabbi Trepp's going to be our next guest after this week's guest, but stay tuned because this will be a hot discussion. Can we move the next holiday? Do you know what the next holiday is, Matt?
One of the Yoms.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we got 3 Yoms coming up. Yom HaShoah.
I just know there's a bunch of Yoms in May. 3-letter month equals Yoms.
Well, actually, in April, we have Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Oh, yeah. April 28th or something like that, right?
Yeah. And then we've got Yom HaZikaron, Israeli Memorial Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day.
Notice how we talk about these in like real dates that actually exist every year as opposed to, Jewish dates. Like if they would just move the holidays to convenient times like Wednesdays, so much better attendance. And then we wouldn't have to worry about like Yom Kippur being on OU.
Okay. OU, for our listeners, not the Orthodox Union. We're talking about Oklahoma University, the Texas-Oklahoma University rivalry, which
they could have something on that day too. They probably don't really worry about it.
No, we'll see about that. Yeah, but you're doing okay otherwise?
I'm doing great. Like my family's good. My niece was just here for a few days. I went for my quinta-annual physical, and mostly in good health, so that's good. I'm a physician, so I'm like the worst of patients. And then like I go in and the doctor's telling me something. I'm like, do we really think that that's true? And he's like, what did you come here for? If you're just going to treat yourself, like, and I was like, well, my wife made me come. So at least I was honest.
That is honest. And then he'll say to you, yeah, you're just like all these bad doctors that don't take care of themselves.
I think your brother's a good doctor. He seemed like it.
He's a good doctor.
Plus he likes to like make fun of you a lot. So he and I can get along really well.
Oh yeah. Well,
I got to see the whole Septimus family dynamic.
Oh, you didn't see my parents. You missed that one piece of the dynamic.
Oh yeah, that would have been really interesting.
But there were some adorable young kids there. They can't quite sing the 4 questions yet, but we'll get there next year.
I think you probably got a couple of years. There were like 2.
Yeah.
You like 5, maybe 6 for the 4 questions.
Yeah.
All right. Should we get to actual today's episode?
Yes, we got a special guest coming all the way from Israel, so I'll let you introduce her.
Technically, she didn't come all the way from Israel. We're just using the interwebs. It's like a much more reasonable time of day for her.
Together, it helps connect us. What can you say?
All right. Rebecca Caspi is the Senior Vice President for Israel and oversees of the Jewish Federations of North America and the General Director of the JFNA's Israel office. Her department oversees hundreds of projects, missions, and other Federation activities in Israel, interfaces with all levels of the Israeli government, including all of the multi-letter agencies that I'm not going to list that are JFNA's partners. And she represents the North American Jewish community to Israel's top business, philanthropic, military, academic, judicial, rabbinic, and communal leaders. Like, clearly, Becky is the person to know in Israel. If I would have known her last time, I probably would have gotten cooler things to see. Most recently, she's been overseeing the relief efforts on behalf of the North American Jewish Federations, which have collectively raised almost $1 billion. She holds a BA in Archaeology and Ancient History from the University of Pennsylvania, an MA in Middle Eastern Studies from New York University. a who's who of anti-Semitism nowadays, and an MBA from Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Hopefully less anti-Semitism going on there. She's married with 3 children, and she lives in Motza Elite, just outside of Jerusalem. Becky, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here with you both.
All right. What time is it in Israel now? It's like mid-afternoon, right?
4:45.
Yeah, that caffeine slump, but I'm here without caffeine, but I think I'm ready.
Oh, I quit caffeine like 2 weeks ago. We should talk about that, Daniel, but not right now. All right. So, how did you get this job? Like, what inspired you with a BA in archaeology not to become Indiana Jones and instead to go work for JFNA?
So I'm supposed to give you the real answer, correct?
No, give me the entertaining answer.
It's really hard to survive on an archaeologist's salary in Israel. And I learned that very early on when I moved here to Israel. And I had big goals like eating every day and having a roof over my head. So that caused me to consider different career choices. But I have to say that my entry into Jewish communal work was entirely serendipitous, because I'm pretty sure, knowing a little bit about you, Matt, and Daniel, having worked with you for some time, that it's possible that my Jewish background and yours are very, very different.
Well, probably, yeah. I mean, everybody's is a little bit different, right?
Yeah, but I grew up totally unaffiliated. Although I grew up in the largest Jewish city in the world, New York City.
The true homeland.
Well, possibly. I grew up the child of 2 very, very proud native New Yorkers, and our affiliation was to the United States and to the community in which we lived. And both my parents were scientists, and so for them, having grown up in the shadow of World War II, the questions about God and religion had been negated pretty early on. And so, unlike probably a lot of the people with whom we're engaging right now who are going to listen to this podcast, and certainly the whole federation system and the alphabet that you mentioned of organizations you mentioned in your opening remarks, were outside my outside my area of knowledge and expertise. But I did, and forgive me for just a minute as I slide into something I really don't like, which is jargon. I did grow up in a home that was infused with, wait for it, core Jewish values. And so that meant hard work, service, charity, family, and a whole bunch of different things that I think we live as active and engaged Jews today as a moral code and an ethical code and a guide to life. So when I studied archaeology, I wasn't aware that people went to college to learn a profession, as perhaps the two of you did. My parents said, find something that makes your heart sing. And for me, that was archaeology and ancient history, which brought me to Israel. I first came as a summer student and excavated, and then I was invited back for a number of seasons as a teaching assistant. And there was something in the air, something in the water, something in the way people talked to each other and related to each other, the authenticity, the directness, that even though it was very different from the environment in which I had grown up, it felt very similar. It had a heavy accent. I didn't speak the language and I didn't know the codes of conduct, but there was something about it that just sat right with me and got me to be very curious about life in Israel. And when I finished my degrees, I came and I figured, as someone who didn't grow up, as I've said, in a connected Jewish community and has no relatives here, so I had no natural network. I didn't have my buddies from Hillel or Camp Ramah or any of those other great networks that many people enjoy. I gave myself a year because as a student of history, I knew that my ancestors had prayed for the right to live in this place. And even though I didn't feel I had to mortgage my life to that memory, I did feel sort of like maybe I should give it a shot. So I gave myself that year. I said, if I can support myself, learn a little bit of Hebrew and get by and make a couple of friends, then we'll see. And that was a little over 42 years ago. So I guess it went well. Now I know Austin is a big music town, right? I've got that right.
Yes.
And I'm fortunate that I'm musical. I'm a musician. And that really helped me pick up the sound and tenor and the language very quickly because I'm just tuned into sound. And so even though I'm someone for whom how I express myself is really important, and I don't know how I was smart enough to know that I had to step back from that and allow myself to make embarrassing, stupid, frequent mistakes, because otherwise I would be so intimidated by the grammar of trying to get things right that I would never allow myself to speak. And so I was very, very fortunate that I got over that hump and I was able to connect with people pretty quickly.
Wow, that's incredible. So no Hebrew school growing up, and you didn't have to suffer through like somebody like Daniel teaching you all the vowels. None of that.
I don't teach people vowels. Just, vowels.
I didn't say you yourself. I said somebody like you.
No, and that sounds to you like a bonus or a benefit. To me, it ended up being something of a handicap. But I know now to tell every person who's trying to deal with modern Hebrew that the word you can't pronounce when you're trying to read it or can't figure out what it is, just imagine what it might be in English. And 99% of the time, you're going to be right. You're actually looking at an English word written in the Hebrew alphabet. So I don't know if that's just my tip for the day for our listeners.
And by the way, I just got back from Nashville to do a college visit. And I would just want to say that I do not think Austin's the live capital of the world or the United States even.
Yeah, probably. But can I add one other insight that actually, and thanks to you, Daniel, for giving me some sense of what we might talk about today. I don't know where our journey will take us, but it gave me the chance to reflect a little bit. And I had an insight that I haven't had before. And that was having grown up in the United States, unaffiliated, but very empowered and in a very culturally Jewish home, was actually the perfect preparation for moving to Israel and becoming a secular Israeli. Because most Israelis do not live a synagogue-centric lifestyle. Most Israelis are deeply committed to the Jewish people, to Jewish life, to the values that I've already mentioned, and I know we all share in common, but they express them differently. And for some, I realized in thinking about our conversation that may be exactly what was so resonant for me, that I felt we were vibrating on the same wavelength, even though we were doing it across culture and continent, because we had been programmed in some ways by the same essence of what is at the heart of our shared Jewish background and faith.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that when they go to Israel, right? In their own way. Everybody has their own unique, and look, there are some people who go and come back and they go, I don't get it, but that's pretty rare, right? Most people go and they just have this connection to the people and the land, and it's their own personal connection. But in a lot of ways, it doesn't have anything to do with synagogue or being overly religious. It has to be being Jewish. And I think it's misunderstood. And I think the media likes to play this up about the schism, I guess, in Jewry between American Jewry and Israeli Jewry. But the reality is that the vast majority of Israeli Jews are as secular as American Jews. You do have the very religious, obviously, but you have very religious here too. And so I'm glad that you brought that out and mentioned that most of Israel is a secular society.
And I think we are more connected as a global Jewish people than we have ever been before in our history. People have business connections. People have family connections. People have experienced different programs and things together. And, when I moved here, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have email. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have faxes. I mean, there were dinosaurs literally walking around Jerusalem when I moved here. So you understand that our ability to be and sustain hyperconnectivity with the people that matter to us, regardless of where they are, is more true today for the Jewish people than it's ever been before. And I think that the people who say that there's a schism don't actually live what I live and what I think you probably both live, which is daily, hourly contact with people from the other side of the pond.
Yeah, I mean, you are correct. Certainly being more interconnected, and I think that allows some people to talk about the good and the connection, and then also some of the rift, right? So, you can't have as much of a rift if you're not connected either, right? It's like if you don't know what's going on there, and long distance is $3 a minute, right? It's a quick, hey, I'm alive, I'll talk to you in 3 weeks, right? And you hang up.
Were you listening in on my weekly calls to my parents when I first moved here?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that's what it was like, right? And nowadays, you can, I mean, we used to have really convenient flights to Israel, not so much right now. And, you're in Israel and we're here and we can speak live, and, the Jerusalem Post and Haaretz, depending on which side of the aisle you're on, keep you updated on every single happening. I mean, there's a new story out every 3 minutes. So, not to mention Twitter and social media. So yeah, we are more interconnected, I think. So tell me, what's some of the most important things you're doing right now as we're talking about the connection between North America and Israel? What are the most important things you're doing right now?
Well, I think conversations like this rank pretty highly for me because you're right. There actually is a new news story coming out about every 3 minutes. Sometimes I think that's actually a long news cycle for things that are going on here. And I think in this moment, things that are going on there, both of which impact our global Jewish community. And so a lot of what we're seeking to do at Jewish Federations of North America, and what I'm personally doing, is trying to help get people, give people the ability to understand the context of what's happening and how the events are unfolding. Because I'm sure it probably never happens on, I don't know, Channel 3 News in Austin or whatever the station is that everybody loves to watch. But you can get a very myopic image of a situation that is entirely lacking in nuance and doesn't allow you to understand the broader context of what's happening in the moment. And for our North American Jewish Federation community, that insight, which informs so much of the work that they're doing locally with other faith communities and other ethnic communities, and also on behalf of Israel and in defense of Israel and fighting anti-Semitism, depends on actually knowing what's happening, on having real information, which is sadly sometimes pretty hard to come by right now. So a lot of our work is in trying to bring insight and information from what's happening in Israel and also in other parts of the Jewish world, especially now in Russia and Ukraine, with the terrible war that continues to rage on there, into the North American community. So this is also a very busy couple of weeks in Israel as we're heading into Memorial Day and Independence Day, Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. And so we have a lot of groups here on the ground, and I'm meeting with a lot of communities. And also, in the midst of this long and awful war, we're continuing to work to try and bring relief and help spur recovery and regeneration of the vibrant life that so many of us and our listeners today are familiar with from October 6th and before.
And what is when you have these conversations with people from North America, what is their view of what's happening in Israel? Do we have a clear picture of what's really happening? Do we have it wrong? As you speak to different people?
I love questions like that, Matt, because it's like when people ask me, so what do Israelis really think about that thing? I'm like, well, you realize we're mostly a Jewish country. And it's hard to answer on behalf of a very opinionated, smart, informed, tuned-in people. But I think generally the broad swath of the American Jewish community has a pretty good understanding of what's going on in Israel. Let's for a moment allow ourselves to discount the extremists on any side of the continuum that we might choose to draw and say, yes, I think people know that Israel has been shaken to its very core by the events of October 7th and the war that has followed, that the continued absence of 59 hostages who remain in Gaza is something I actually don't, that's a hard thing for me to translate to an American reality, because it tugs at the collective communal soul in Israel in a way that I didn't know. And perhaps if I'd lived my adult life in America, I would know, but I didn't have it in the experience that I brought with me. And for many, many Israelis, we can never fully restart until every single hostage has been returned home, whether alive or sadly no longer with us. And I think having that reality hovering over the country at a time when there is continued military unrest, mostly in Gaza, less so today in Lebanon, and the looming Iranian nuclear threat against which is not only looming, but growing ever closer, that they will achieve weaponization, are the dominant dynamics in Israeli society today. But when you think about the impact of a war that is now 19 months, nearly 19 months long, there is not a single person in this country or a single aspect of life or society that hasn't been deeply and forever changed. Whether that's your own family or close circle of friends who may be among those touched by loss or injury, whether it's the workforce, whether it's the absence of people who have been serving hundreds and hundreds of days in reserve duty, whether it's the economic strain of the ongoing cost of a war that has harmed workplaces and many people have lost jobs. We have had major areas of the country that have been evacuated for many, many, many months. That means if you're a farmer on the northern border, your farm isn't functioning. And all the workers that you employed and all the things, it's been out of function for a very, very long time. So I think most of the Americans I speak with, and I've had the privilege to interact with, do understand the depth of challenge to the country. I think for many, understanding why there isn't more of a consensus and a united front as there was early in the war under the strain of the different political positions is more challenging for us to explain. But hey, it can't be easy for you to be explaining to people on this side of the pond American politics either. I think the world at large is just in a terribly contentious, divided moment. And lucky for me, Federation is about building consensus and being respectful and trying to make room for other voices, even those we don't agree with. And that's what we try to do in the conversations that we're part of.
I think that's really interesting because, when I was there in January. Daniel and I were there October of 2023. So very different feel in the country this January. Right? I was there right at about 2 weeks after the northern ceasefire. I was in the north. And you could see this collective, of a lot of people in society in Israel. And, still that underlying the hostages are there, but it did start to feel a little bit more like normal as functioning Israeli society, which I thought was good. I'm hoping that will, spur tourism this summer. What are you hearing about people traveling to Israel this summer? Are they happening? Or is, Birthright going? Are the teen tours going?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll just look back a couple of days ago and say that I really think that this Passover was the first holiday, the first moment when most Israelis had a more or less normal holiday, family, communal experience in a very, very, very long time. And that was, I don't know whether it's just because, how long can any person hang on to such a difficult moment? Or because I think your observations are apt, Matt, that there has been a shift in the situation. We're not in an acute emergency anymore. We're not fearful for the existence of the state itself, and we know where things stand, and we have had major military victories in Syria and in Lebanon and even in Gaza, and the IDF is really in control, I think, of the situation. And I think you're right that people have largely worked very hard to try and come back to as much of whatever normal might be today as they could. In in terms of tourism, Birthright has done an important pivot with a lot of support from Federation, which is that they are really focused now on bringing volunteers to Israel on short 8-day and I believe 10-day to 14-day experiences. And they've also, and this is even breaking news, Daniel, I'm not sure. They've, to some of our listeners, they've also extended the age range. So people that missed the Birthright window or maybe came on one of the very first trips are likely eligible to come again, because I believe eligibility is now up to the age of 50 to take part in these volunteer trips.
I missed it again. Literally every time they extended, I keep missing it.
I'm still young enough. I still have a few more years.
Yay. Matt, I don't know. You might know a few people. If you really, really want to come and volunteer, give us a call. We'll see what we can do. But I think that, and by the way, that volunteerism is needed. It's needed both because of the hard work that people contribute when they spend time here, but that energy of seeing those Birthright buses whizzing around the country. And also, one of the most breakthrough aspects of those trips that have changed so many lives is what's known in Hebrew as the mifgash, that meeting between Israeli and global Jewish peers. And the friendships that have been formed, like, it's kind of weird to me that I have 3 adult children, and 2 of my children participated in Birthright as the Israeli soldiers that other people came to meet, which, I don't know, it still sometimes amazes me that that's the life I've chosen and that's where my kids are. But even
they have American citizenship, dual American citizenship.
They do.
Yeah, so then they can probably, to at least some, and an American parent, right? So they can somewhat relate to these kids that are coming over.
Not only that, although I have a very large and wonderful family in the United States, I'm the only person from my large and wonderful family who ever made Aliyah. So we spent many, many family vacations, I'm going to use a technical term, schlepping our family back to the United States to get to know all their first cousins. And so that was really important to us. And yes, but even though they sound American, my kids are Israeli. And so for them, seeing themselves reflected in the eyes of their peers and for others, and I think not just for them as Israelis, and there are more than 100,000 Israelis who've spent time with Jews from outside of Israel who are their peers in age and to some degree in experience. But there's, hundreds of thousands of North American Jews who have spent time here and who have seen the world and how Jewish life could be lived by others through a very different pair of glasses. In fact, this coming, let me get this right, Tuesday evening is Erev Yom HaZikaron, is the evening at which we begin to honor those who have fallen in Israel's National Memorial Day. And I have the privilege each year of representing the global Jewish community at a very large ceremony in the Jerusalem corridor at a site called Latrun, where maybe 5,000 young adult participants in another program called Masa, which brings young adults for longer periods of time, 3 months to a year, to Israel, will come. And this ceremony is important because almost all the ceremonies in Israel happen in Hebrew, but this ceremony is in English and it's accessible. And it is really inspiring for me to watch young adult Jews from other parts of the world have the penny drop for them and understand the high cost of living Jewishly that can be paid and sometimes must be paid in the last year and a half by far too many of our wonderful young men and women here in Israel, in order to maintain a Jewish state for all of us. And I think those comings together and the way they impact all of us are the importance. I don't think the importance of that can ever be overstated.
Why is it in English? Do you know?
In order for them, the global participants, to be able to experience it without the delay of translation, without the distance or the filter of someone else speaking those words. And there's also an effort, whenever there is a ceremony like this, and there are thousands and thousands of them across Israel on Memorial Day in every school, in every synagogue, in every community. You tell the stories of those who have been lost. And at the Masa ceremony, they always honor those who have been lost, who either came to Israel as new immigrants, as new olim, and fell, or may have been lost in acts of terror here. And that's another way to reduce the distance and the otherness of something that could feel very foreign, but because of the way it's done so thoughtfully and so in such a smart way, actually, I think really brings it home into the hearts of the people who come and participate in that ceremony.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that they did that in English. It's very, I can imagine it's very much brings people together, right?
Yeah.
To be able to experience it, but experience it firsthand in your own language, right? Not having to listen to a translator, or like when I'm in Israel, have somebody tell me what's going on around me, since I, half the time don't know. That's really very, very, real interesting. What else are you hearing about, trips from America or American Jews? Are you getting people reaching out, wanting to come and do? I know JNF ran a lot of volunteer missions. I think those have kind of petered out a little bit recently.
Yeah. So definitely, I think federations are coming back in force. Unfortunately, and I don't think this is only to Israel, but flights and travel costs globally have just become so exorbitant. So I've been in my job for quite some time. Sometimes it's good to be challenged to try and figure out ways to do things differently, and I hope I'm never on autopilot, but probably we all have days when we might be just a teeny tiny bit on autopilot. So we're trying to find other ways that we can create meaningful, accessible experiences like the one I just described for people who are coming on trips with their communities. And that's something that is also part of our sort of daily work, whether we're producing the mission in its entirety. I'm happy to tell you, the second national LGBTQ mission coming for Pride Week in June. And I'm sure Daniel and his team have the information about that. And if there are people, by the way, it's highly subsidized and it's going to be an awesome, awesome program, but registration is closing soon. So maybe there's a way that we can share with people who might be listening, if there's anyone in Austin who might want to join that experience. So whether we're helping a community have one exchange in the Knesset with a member of Knesset that they'd like to hear from, or we're doing a whole mission program, we're really working to try and lower the costs, lower barriers, and make it easier for people to come. And yep, the simple answer, sorry, I keep giving you long answers. I think that's my job today, but people want to come, and people are coming, and people are also planning far into the future. So we're seeing missions getting on the books for 2026 and 2027, and we're excited.
That's great. Becky,
sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, no, I just, we had Yakir Englander on our podcast, and he talked about how the Israeli community has really seen the efforts of North American Jewry and the response to October 7th. I'd love to get your impression. I mean, do you feel like that they see the help and the resources that were sent overseas? And he said it really has opened up a new conversation, in his opinion, that, before October 7th, October 6th, there was some tension between North American, and I'm going to call it specifically U.S. Jewry and parts of U.S. Jewry, and with some of Israeli Jewry in particular, and around certain perceived actions of what the government's doing and not doing, and their own feelings. And post October 7th, from what he was describing, there seems to be a new covenant, a new brit that has kind of opened up. And I'd love to get your perspective on that. You kind of alluded to it a little bit in your comments earlier, but I'd love to kind of specifically talk a little bit about that.
I definitely think that's the case. And in a way, it would almost have to be the case, because the scope and scale of what federations have done since October 7th is entirely unparalleled. As you said in the opening, nearly $1 billion, or Matt, I think you said nearly $1 billion have been raised. Almost all that money is already here and at work, or has been expended over now 18 plus months. And to me, I'll give some specifics in a second, but I really want to say, to me, one of the most majestic things about the federation system, and there are many, is the system's ability to do really, really big things and to reach a single person in his or her moment of greatest need. And it's not obvious that a system like ours would have that elasticity and that capability. So let me give you a couple of examples of things that federations have done. Sorry, it's hard to think about some of this. So one of the grants that our committee, which is has had the privilege to allocate funds for the whole system that have been upstreamed to JFNA as the representative organization of our system. One of the grants that we made relatively early on was to an unlikely pairing of organizations that had never come together before. The Israel Association, the IDF, the Israel Association of IDF Widows and Orphans, and Yoldot, which is the umbrella organization of Israeli midwives, because there had been a large number of men who had fallen, who left behind wives and partners who were pregnant and needed help in their pregnancy journey, at delivery, and during the postpartum period. Now, if I tell you that our committee has been so scrupulous about every sacred dollar that has been entrusted to us, and there have been hundreds of millions of dollars, every dollar comes under the microscope to make sure that we find the highest and best use of that money on behalf of the incredibly generous, trusting donors who have sent that through their local communities to us. I mean, when we presented this proposal to them, people were like, yes, we couldn't even finish our words. They were just, yes, we want to fund this. Can you imagine? We've had to renew that grant 3 times because throughout this war, more and more people have fallen. And so on the one hand, that means that we're living in the depth of this sorrow constantly. But on the other hand, we get these amazing images of the babies who have been born and the most happy moment. So that's one example, I think, for these women, for their families. We were the ones. The Federation community stepped in to be with them at their saddest and most joyous moment. But I'll give you another example. Most people are not aware that one of the strategic targets of Hamas on October 7th, when they invaded the Western Negev, was to destroy the agriculture in the region. Now, let me be very clear. When we take pride and we say we made the desert bloom, that's what we're talking about. It's those fields. It's that place, the Western Negev. And so when they came in, they intentionally kidnapped and killed agricultural workers and farmers. They destroyed agricultural buildings. They killed farm animals. I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of chickens and cows. And they completely, they either destroyed, burned, or stole the farming equipment. And that meant that even for the many months during which that close border region adjacent to Gaza was still under intense fire, the brave farmers who wanted to come back and restart growing crops, which are essential for Israel's national food security. Over 70% of our fresh vegetables come from that area. They didn't have the equipment. And so when we were presented with the opportunity to help the farmers of the Western Negev, in all the kibbutzim, in all the moshavim, and even independent farmers, to make up the difference between what the government insurance policy would provide them for their lost tractors. You probably know a lot more about farming in Texas than I do, but I'm learning a lot.
I don't really do a lot of farming here. Ranching, yes. Farming, not so much here.
Okay. Well,
and I'm an urban boy.
You're an urban guy. Okay. But all of that equipment, the irrigation systems and the tractors and combines and all of that equipment which was destroyed, when they said to us, the total loss right now is estimated at about $25 million. We believe that the government insurance policy will give back about half of that money and allow farmers to repurchase equipment. But it's a small country. There's actually no marketplace here to buy an 8-year-old tractor. You just can't do it. So the farmers, understandably, were pretty risk averse and weren't willing to take loans to do that. And Federation stepped in and said, we believe in that dream. We believe that the desert will bloom again. And Federation's guaranteed for the farmers that they could buy back that equipment. And guess what? The tractors are rolling. The farms are green again. And there is not a person in the Western Negev who doesn't know. And not only because we put stickers and plaques on all that equipment, but because they really know, that it was the folks from Federation who kept coming down to visit them, to hug them, to hold them, and to say, in this terrible time of loss, we've got you. And if I sound a little overwhelmed, I can't tell you what a privilege it is to stand between the tens of thousands of donors who may never get to come and stand at Kibbutz Be'eri or Kfar Aza or in Nachal Oz and see what we've made possible. But we do that on your behalf and on their behalf, and it's nothing short of a miracle. Those are a couple of examples of the ways that federations are leaving a footprint. And if I have a moment, I'll just say one more. Early on, programs like that, where we were really trying to plug holes and help people just get through these terrible moments, were a major, major focus of Federation's work. But it's been many months now that we're also looking to ensure that we're not only meeting the needs of today, we are also laying the track and building the infrastructure that will keep Israel strong for tomorrow. So I'll just give one more. Federations have partnered with Israel's Ministry of Health to establish 16 community-based mental health centers where we helped with 50% of the startup costs. The ministry came in with the other 50% and all the ongoing run rate costs for years to come, because we literally are out of therapeutic treatment space to help all of the Israelis who have been traumatized by these events, whether through their service in the IDF or their experience at the Nova Festival or being parents sheltering for months on end with their children in a safe room during relentless rocket fire. The cost to Israelis' mental health is astronomical, and federations in myriad ways are helping with training therapists, providing direct care, and actually providing space in which that therapy can happen. People know that.
Yeah, that's when Daniel and I were there in November of 23, they were already talking about that. That was one of the things. I think Jaffe was sort of on the head of making sure they had a good trauma response at that point. It was just the very, very beginning, but I'm glad to hear that money has gone towards training therapists and building centers and really addressing that.
Yeah. So, and then, Becky, I know we only have a little more time left, but you probably know well that the Western Galilee, we're part of that partnership. Mate Asher, Akko, Matt had a chance to go up there and volunteer and actually practice medicine. He showed me his physician's ID.
That's right. I'm fully empowered.
Fully empowered.
So I'm not that empowering.
But he, was in the Galilee Medical Center. What are next steps with the North? Because that's obviously important to our community. It affects Mate Asher in particular. But of course, the economy was hit up in that northern part, even if they weren't part of the evacuation zone. What does that look like?
Well, first, I just want to say thanks to Dr. Matt. We really needed your volunteering and your service, and thank you for being here for the people that you met and helped.
It's interesting, just not to interrupt you, but so many doctors wanted to help and so many hospitals needed the help. And I think it took a while for the Ministry of Health figure out how to connect them effectively. And I will say that partnership and federation actually has done a really good job of making those connections, as opposed to because all these doctors went on and filled out the Ministry of Health form. I think I heard it was 9,000 doctors, and exactly 8,950 of them never got to go because there was no system set up to get doctors over there. Now there is a system. It's very local though. Right. So it's the medical centers connecting with the doctors via the either federation or via partnership that's making that happen.
And also, I will say, I think the way you described it is entirely accurate. By the way, federations also have helped because really our tentacles are everywhere in this crisis. The creation of a system that we should never need, but to help move specifically volunteer physicians and deploy them much more quickly than in the past. And actually, at this point, there are still people who are coming, but it's sort of on order. There are certain specialties that are even at normal times here have been in great demand, but also orthopedic surgeons, eye doctors, rehabilitative medicine, early on pathologists, because we just didn't have enough pathologists to help identify all of the people who had been lost and the remains that had been recovered. So I think we now have a digitized system that will have us ready. But Daniel, back to you and to Matea share. First, let's give a shout out to the incredible mayor of your regional council, Moshe Davidovich, who is serving as the chair of the Northern Confrontation Line communities. So there are actually 18 communities that are really up there at the border with Lebanon that were evacuated for a long period of time. And Matea Share is an interesting example because within the regional council, which is kind of like a county, I guess, in the United States, there are communities that were up at the border that were evacuated. Not all of them have yet been able to go back because of the level of damages in certain places. But there are also communities that never evacuated. Who had it worse? The people that were out of their homes for all of that time, or the people that lived under relentless rocket fire? These are the kinds of questions I don't want to answer. But I will say that I think roughly about a year ago, even before it was possible for people to start returning to the North, as you've recently been able to do, Matt, we understood that the level of physical damage, and in some ways also the level of harm to the people who have lived through this, was greater in the North, because in the South, in the Western Negev, it was a single event of a day, horrific beyond belief. But at that point, the border was sealed back. And although the war raged in Gaza, for the most part, the war happened in Gaza, and the communities right at the border had been evacuated. For people in the North, they only were able to return just a very few months ago. And so we started focusing in that area very early on, working with both the evacuated communities and the non-evacuated communities. Interestingly, and I know in the Western Galilee, this is also true, there are also other ethnic and faith-based communities who didn't evacuate, the Druze and some of the Arab citizens of Israel who were living under very, very difficult conditions. And so we sought to bring help to communities. And I'll just give 2 or 3 quick examples. One, for communities that were evacuated for a very long time, one of the biggest challenges that they faced is trying to hold a sense of community. So we gave them flexible funding that allowed them to determine how they could try and continue to cohere and stay together as a community. So for some, that meant creating events that they could bus everybody to. Even if it wasn't back home, they could bring everybody together to do something. People could have been dispersed in dozens of different hotels and sites, and they weren't seeing each other. How do you do that? We did study boot camps for high school kids who had been learning in remote situations under major challenges with parents who were away in the army and had lost their jobs. And they have to take their matriculation exams and then go into the army and serve this country. What could we do to stabilize them before that? We did boot camps. We brought them together. They were with their friends and they got a real injection of academia, and most of them, thank goodness, made it through. So, and now we had our last round allocation meeting on April 7th. And on April 7th, our focus was very much on Northern Israel. And I told everybody before about the tractors. But the damages to agriculture in the North are far greater than they were to the Western Negev. And I am pleased to tell you, and in 4 years' time or 5 years' time, we are going to raise a glass together and drink l'chaim. Please invite me back, Rabbi and the other guy, because federations have just funded replanting all of the vineyards that were destroyed in the North. So that replanting is going to start shortly. And why did I say 4 or 5 years? Because it's going to take that long before we have the fruits that will yield the wine that I look forward to saying l'chaim with both of you. And we're supporting the return to school and strengthening the school system and so many other things. I think you could wind me up and I could tell you about it for a full 24 hours straight, because
Amen.
so inspired by the way Federation has stepped up to meet all of these different needs. And I think we've done it with heart, and we've done it with the people. We haven't just decided on their behalf. We've done it in consultation.
I think that's amazing. And the work that Federation is doing, this is a great place to leave it. The work that Federation is doing in Israel. I mean, I know, Daniel, we do a lot of stuff here at home, but it's great to hear where all of these, I know a lot of people gave very generously, both in Austin and obviously across the country. And it's great to hear some of the stories of where that money is going and how it's really impacting people's lives.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone in Austin, and to both of you for being such strong leaders for your extraordinary community.
We appreciate your work, Becky. You're doing God's work, Hashem's work. It's really appreciated. And Matt and I, of course, saw it firsthand when we came a few weeks after October 7th and was with your team on the ground. And we hear about it. We see it. Matt and I are still working to get our mission back up and going. We're going to get it moving, hopefully, by the fall or by spring. And we'll be
feel like 2026.
Yes. So
we'll be here.
We'll be there.
There's no doubt.
We'll get there.
Well, thanks for your time, Becky. Thanks everybody for listening. We will see you next week back here on the Rabbi and the Other Guy.